Good. Well, let's try this hammer out here.
Woo!
That's right.
All right.
It's right out, yes.
Oh.
It's mood. It's yeah.
It's mood lighting.
It's the mood. It's the mood setting. Well, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the middle school SPSA presentations. Welcome principals. Welcome board members and staff. We have this scheduled tentatively for a 2-hour session, I believe, and you'll probably walk us through the agenda in a moment. But just wanted to welcome everyone. This is one of the sessions that we gain so much context from every year, your perspectives and the continuity you bring to the goals that you've been working on all year benefits us significantly. We really appreciate the time you put into these. It takes a lot of preparation in addition to the work you're doing every day. So we look forward to it. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. McGee.
Great, and thank you for coming. I know this is difficult to be away from your school, so we will make it worthwhile. But had the opportunity to visit all 3 schools last week, and just every time I walk in there, it's just elevating the quality of education, the commitment to teaching, and your leadership. And I want to recognize the assistant principals too. It is truly a team collaborative effort, and it's so impressive. And as I told I had this morning over at our second cup of coffee at Hoover, I got the thing from parents. Well, their parents want to send their kids out of district or out to a private school. And I said, you know what? I had my grandson here this week, and I cannot think of a better place for him to go than our middle schools. And if I trust my grandson with the middle schools, I trust your kid. And that's how I feel. So this is my first SPSA experience. So I know you've worked hard on the goals and looking forward to hearing them. And thank you for all the board members coming. It's a full day for all of us as well with yet another meeting tonight. So thank you for making time. But I'm going to really just pass this on down to Charles, who will really walk us through, and then we'll start with the presentations.
Well, thank you, Dr. McGee. Good morning, everybody, school board members, principals, and their team here.
Charles, since
yes.
you're on TV, why don't you introduce yourself fully for everybody again?
Okay.
Not just Charles.
Good morning. I'm Charles Young, the Associate Superintendent of Education. This is Catherine Baker, who's the Director of Secondary Education.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. So we're looking forward to this presentation today, our yearly SPSA presentation, where we get an opportunity, the principals, to talk about progress that they made out of their school sites based on the goals that they set last year. So they'll talk about that and spend some time talking about this year's goals. We also try to write those goals in a way, we've talked about this in the past, that they're SMART goals, that they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. That's a criteria that we try to work from. So we're excited to talk about this with you, and we're also excited about this time in public education. It's really a time of change, which is fun and exciting, and there's certain elements of uncertainty in it. But we're working with Common Core state standards and assessment system that is very new to us and causing us to have some interesting conversations in lots of areas about what do we teach and how do we teach it. Lots of exciting things going on in the world of technology with the advent of new technology tools and how to use them effectively in the classroom. And then also we continue to learn more about how students learn and what's the best way to set up instructional models to meet kids' needs. Some of the themes that you'll hear about today and they're all reflected in the district strategic plan and actions, are meeting the needs of all students, implementing the Common Core state standards, and then also that very important goal to us that we work on very hard every year, making sure that we have safe campuses for students, that they're socially and physically emotional safe places for kids to learn and teachers to teach. So I'd like to turn this over to Catherine Baker now, who will talk about today's presentation and talk about the structure a little bit and the agenda. Catherine.
Share the mic. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to take a moment just to thank the board members because you were very gracious to reschedule this presentation so that our principals could take these plans to their site councils. They only meet once a month, so it really helped us out on the scheduling. So thank you. So for those of you who don't know what SPSA is, it's the single plan for student achievement, and it's our plans are budgeted by the School Improvement Fund that again, our board graciously has continued, even though the state has swept all those funds, and we don't have to reserve them for each school site, but we do in this district, so we're very grateful for that. This is the 4th year that we are using document tracking services, which is the format that you see in your board packet that the plan is written into. It's online. It's the 2nd year that the principals are reflecting on their goals of the previous year. We've kind of evolved as we've developed these goals on this tracking system. And we're just really, I don't want to take much time because we want the principals to have the time. So we're going to start with a 5-minute intro by Mr. Barnes from Jordan, and then each of the principals, Sharon Ofek from JLS and Pierre Angeli from Terman, will be spending 15 minutes talking about last year and this year's new goals. And then we'll have an hour for the board members to weigh in, ask questions, and I'll take notes on our boards over there. So, Mr. Barnes.
Great, Ms. Baker, thank you. Good morning. My name is Greg Barnes, and I have the absolute privilege to be principal at Jordan Middle School. I'm honored to start our SPSA presentation with Pierre Angeli and Sharon to talk about the highlights of what we did last year, as well as give you a quick glimpse of what we're working on for the year to come. Before we do get into our individual site work, however, I would like to share a bit about the collective efforts that we've done as a middle school team this past year. So we continue to collaborate with one another in an effort to provide, of course, the most exceptional middle school experience for our children as possible. And we did so in the 3 following ways: collaboration, supporting the needs of all students, and creating a safe and welcoming school environment. So within collaboration, of course, we're talking about teaming. One of the unique things about middle school is that we have core teachers which share a group of students. It's a wonderful, wonderful way for our kids to learn. We'll talk briefly about Common Core state standards within each of our presentations. And of course, you're well aware of all the different meeting structures we have in place, from IS training, steering committees, department meetings, joint middle school meetings. We all value the opportunity to work together as colleagues. Secondly, under supporting the needs of all students, we'll continue our rich elective programs. As you know, we're very fortunate to be in this district and offer a wealth of enrichment opportunities for all of our children. We'll continue to foster an educational environment that meets the needs of all kids, so that's inclusion and our response to intervention you'll be hearing about today as well. Our instructional shifts, as we've aligned to Common Core, specifically with the student or the SBAC testing coming out last October. We had to shift and align, and we did a lot of exceptional work last year across all 3 sites. And then finally, we've each laid the groundwork for some exciting writing work that we started last year, in many cases, over many years, in some cases, I should say. And we're excited to let you know about that as well. Lastly, creating a safe and welcoming school environment. Obviously, meeting the social, emotional needs of all of our children is our primary focus. Having them feel connected to school is something that we get up every morning for. And I'm excited to hear, excited for you to hear, rather, what 3 schools have in store for you today. So with having said that, I'd like to transition right into Jordan. Let you know that I want to begin by saying how fortunate I feel to be principal at Jordan, to get up every morning and work with the people who call Jordan home, from the faculty to the front office to the people who keep our campus looking beautiful. I want to particularly acknowledge the work of the administrative team, not only last year, but this year. So to Grant Althouse and Ellie Slack for their continued dedication and hard work. We could not have had as successful 2 or 3 year run without those 2. And of course, Ms. Rebecca Westover and Matt Lindner for their continued hard work and dedication to the Jordan community this year. In my opening remarks about Jordan, I'll continue the themes of collaboration, meeting the needs of all students, and student connectedness. I'll focus in particular on a couple of efforts within each of those, though, that we think had a more profound effect on students. So collaboration. Of course, you know, district-wide we have 5-6 articulation meetings, joint middle school meetings, as well as staff development. Within Jordan, this is now our 2nd year of really offering teachers an opportunity to get into each other's classrooms, to observe what they're doing, for differentiation, for classroom management. And this year in particular, at Jordan, we have 20 brand new staff members. So we're hoping that they'll take advantage of that opportunity. We're also in our 2nd year of really fine-tuning our feedback loop. When we throw an initiative out there, it's really important that we get feedback not only from our faculty, our parents, but especially our students. And I'll be touching a little bit more on that toward the end of my presentation. Teaming, as I mentioned earlier, very important structure within middle school. As you know, we have done a lot with structuring the teaming meeting and how it looks, talking about students, having a protocol for meeting their needs, but most importantly, what we're most proud of last year was this idea that connectedness equals caring. And we really wanted our teachers to find ways to connect with students. So not only do we bring up these students and talk about them, but what are some of the things that teachers would do in particular to really try to connect emotionally with those children. Of course, we're talking about Common Core work as well. Again, all departments made strides in aligning their curriculums to Common Core last year. I need to thank in particular, I think our math department. They did an exceptional job last year at Jordan. Abby Garrison, Josh Spira, Bonnie Finato, just to name a few. I do need to thank also the steering committees because they led a lot of that work and has afforded us across all 3 middle school sites to land in the same place. The second area I'd like to focus on is, of course, meeting the academic needs of all of our kids. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're in Palo Alto. We have a wonderful amount of resources at our disposal. As such, we then have an obligation to continue to provide robust enrichment and elective options, which we are very proud to say we continue to do at Jordan. After-school math and science clubs offer our children an opportunity to go deeper, or in some cases expand their knowledge in the areas of math and science. And of course, our science fair, which we're currently planning now, is an opportunity for our kids to showcase their talents. On the other side, we also have a number of interventions that we're very proud of at Jordan, including our after-school interventions, Math Rewind, our after-school tutoring for our families that live in East Palo Alto. I have to thank again Abby Garrison, Josh Spira, Bonnie Finato, Norma Himes, and Judy Argumento for their continued support for these programs. We have our weekly AST, Academic Study Team meetings, where we track every single student that has a D or F in any class. It doesn't matter if it's a core class or an elective class, and we meet each week to discuss those kids. And here's how we hold ourselves accountable each week. We ask ourselves, can this student benefit from any one of our interventions? Is this intervention working for this student? Why or why not? Why did it work for one student and not the other? What is the action item for this student, and did we follow through on that action item? We set a lofty goal this year of looking at our AST file and we tried rather to reduce the number of Ds and Fs by roughly 40% from 131 to 80. That was our goal. It's a lofty goal, and it's a goal that we'll continue to set. I would much rather set high, almost unobtainable goals than to not set the bar too high. As a result, while we did not meet our 40%, I am excited to say that we reduced the number of students receiving Ds and Fs from 131 students, from 131 students to 116, which is a reduction of 11%. I will say that over the last 2 years, we went from 181 students down to 116, which is an overall reduction of roughly 36%. We are now in our 3rd year of Project 45, again looking at our CST scores for all students who are scoring basic or below in either English, language arts, or math, and then tracking those kids. It's very exciting for me personally to know that we're in our 3rd year. The class of 2014 is now at Palo, and we've had a wonderful opportunity to articulate with them exactly the resources that have been made available to those students and how that data has specifically lent to Tier 1 differentiation of instruction, and all of that work is now passed on to our colleagues here at Palo. Inclusion in co-teaching. 2 years ago, Dr. Holly Wade had the insight to bring to the district Dr. Richard Vila. We were moved by his work, and as a result, we invited him to Jordan in the spring of 2013. Now, 2 years later, we're proud to say that we have 18 co-taught sections of general education and special education teachers. But simply having 18 co-taught sections really isn't enough. We feel obligated to provide those teachers with ongoing professional development, which takes the form of a specific individual simply charged with working on the relationship between those two individuals. So, for example, if you have a special education teacher in the general education classroom who is not subject specific in math or science, or they need time planning, this individual helps bridge the connection between those two adults. In addition, this individual will go into a general education classroom where special education students may be pushed in and helps that particular teacher modify their instruction to meet the needs of those kids. We're very excited about our work in that area, and in summary, it's led to inspiring changes across the board, including our master schedule, It's been a shift in our instructional practice, and we really feel that we're doing it with fidelity. Lastly, within this umbrella, I want to quickly talk about our writing work last year. We took about a year and a half to survey students, faculty, parents about what an ideal writing program at Jordan would look like. And here's the breakdown. From the parent side, it's all about feedback. They want feedback from teachers on how their kids are doing, but not just any feedback. They want it clear, they want it timely, and they want it meaningful. Consistency is another piece of feedback from our parents. They want their 7th grade English students' experience to be exactly the same or roughly the same as any other teachers. In other words, their experience shouldn't be determined rather by the teacher that they have. So alignment and consistency across the board. Oddly enough, that's where our faculty landed as well. They wanted a writing program that had a lot of feedback, and they wanted articulation between the grade levels. So from that information, we created a survey, which we handed to our teachers. And as a result, we landed in 3 specific areas. Number 1 is a brand new site goal for Jordan. Phase 1 of that site goal is being implemented this year, and that is that every single department at every single grade level will have common rubrics that can be transferred to multiple assignments in writing. So whether you are an art teacher, a science teacher, or an English language arts teacher, you're creating rubrics within your department at your grade level, which specifically looks for targeted areas of writing. Within the English language arts department, they've done a wonderful job creating their own department handbook. I need to thank Sharon quickly for sharing some of her resources over the last couple of years. As it specifically relates to a student handbook that JLS has been really hard at working on the last few years. We hope to use that this year as well. And then we've been able to provide some additional support. One of the things we really wanted to target is writing for our struggling students or students who maybe need help with organization or sentence structure. So we created another elective this year called Writer's Workshop. I'm very fortunate to hire a phenomenal teacher, Miss Erica Ng, who is not only our EL coordinator, our ALD teacher, but she teaches 3 sections of Writer's Workshop for 7th and 8th graders. It's a semester-long class, and the entire goal is to get those kids in there, get them to be better writers, and move them along. Lastly, under creating safe and welcoming schools, we also have a partner in crime to our AST meetings. That's our HST meetings, where the focus of that body is to look at the health services-oriented needs of all of our children. So imagine the administrators, Ms. Linda Lenoir, our nurse here from the district, our counselors, a couple of other third-party individuals sitting around that table talking about the health needs of our children. It is a profound meeting. We keep track of those kids every single week, and we're very happy to intervene with a lot of their health and social emotional needs as a result. One of the last things I'll talk about today are our climate committee. And before I get into the work that the climate committee has done this year, I need to pause for a moment and acknowledge the efforts of Grant Althouse. As assistant principal last year, our success in providing a safe and welcoming school was due in large part to his talent and dedication as a leader. I also need to acknowledge the feedback loops and metrics currently employed by our current assistant principal, Matt Lindner. This importance of obtaining immediate and relevant feedback will only help strengthen all of our climate initiatives moving forward. Other than that, Jordan rocks.
Yeah.
No, it does. It's a respectful, open-minded community of kind and safe students. And it's our vision statement for the climate committee, and Matt is doing a fantastic job shepherding that responsibility. We're proud to say we continue with our anti-bullying efforts as well. Bullying across the board at Jordan is being reduced. We're not seeing as many instances of bullying that we had maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, and that's due in large part to our dedicated counseling team and our solution team approach. Finally, the last 2 things I'll talk about are our Jordan Jaguar journey. It's our 3rd year now. Again, I have to thank Sharon for opening her doors to us a few years back, allowing us to come in and see exactly what Panther Camp was all about. We continue to hear wonderful things about Tiger Camp as well. And we're happy to say that in our 3rd year, we continue to provide a soft landing for our kids, our 6th graders, as they transition from elementary into middle school. Lastly is our Jordan Cup. Do we have time for a story? You're so kind.
we like
Thank you for that. All right. So going back in time, it's a couple years ago. My daughter and I are sitting on the couch during the summertime. And mind you, we've watched Harry Potter on loop for 17 years.
Yes.
We're sitting on the couch, and it's the scene where Harry gets the sorting hat put on his head. Do you remember? Do you recall? And the hat says, Gryffindor. And Mallory stands up, and she says, I want to go to Hogwarts. And I look at her, and I think to myself, well, we've seen this movie like 117 times. Why now are you saying you're so excited to go to Hogwarts? Just because I want to be in Gryffindor, and I want to win the House Cup. And I thought, okay, she's a year and a half away from middle school. There's something there. How could we take that energy and excitement and translate it to Jordan? So fast forward 2 years, we're in the second year of the Jordan Cup. It's a fun, friendly, spirited competition where advisories get to compete against each other. Some of our teachers are really into it too. And our grade levels get to compete. And over the last 2 years, we've seen our participation in spirited activities go through the roof. In conclusion, I can't really conclude without publicly thanking and acknowledging the dedication and passion of our entire faculty at Jordan. We've done a lot in 3 years, and our accomplishments speak directly to the love that they bring to work with them each and every day. In particular, looking back on the last 3.25 years, I need to thank a lot of people who have made it possible, from the board to Dr. Max McGee, former Superintendent Kevin Skelly, Charles Young, Scott Bowers, Catherine Baker, Dr. Holly Wade, Marilyn Cook, Grant, Ellie, Matt, Rebecca, Jolene, Tiffany, our counseling team, many others for their help. Working alongside them truly inspires me. There is not a day that I do not wake up and not look forward to coming in. And I'm very proud to call Jordan home. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Sharon Ofick, and I'm the principal of JLS. And I will say, I'm going to share this story. Just before we started today, I leaned over to Greg and I said, if you had one God-given talent and you could choose between being a superstar athlete or a performer, which would you choose? And he said, performer. Without even thinking twice. So I just want to say he's a hard act to follow. Yeah. So anyway, good morning. Just like Greg, I'm proud to work at JLS, and I feel very honored that I get to work and be surrounded on a daily basis by so many amazingly talented professionals. And I couldn't be happier to get up just like Greg every morning and drive on over to JLS and spend the day there. And those days are long, and so that's a good thing. Yes. Before I continue, I just want to acknowledge some JLS staff who are here in the audience. I happen to have the luxury of having a new administrative team every year, and you'll hear a little bit about that. So some of these folks are new to you as well. We have Eston Melton, who is a assistant principal, Hillary Miller, assistant principal, Becky Cogswell Tosa, and somewhere here, I saw it, over here is Ann Laurie, who started last year for the first year. She was our literacy TOSA, a teacher on special assignment working with literacy. We named it literacy because we thought Common Core is all about literacy across the curriculum. Well, we've just renamed her title for this year as Common Core Coach because it's really clear, like that is what she's working on. So welcome to Anne. She's really been an additional member to our administrative team, and we invite her into our meetings and brainstorm with her, and then she spreads everything with so many staff. It makes things so much easier when we have an extra person on hand. So thank you so much to all of them for all of their efforts. Last school year, we started out with some significant challenges at JLS. Our construction project experienced delays, which meant that fencing surrounding the entire campus, with the exception of 4 portables along the Waverly driveway, were removed only the weekend before school started. We had no functioning clocks or bell system for the first month of school. We had newly landscaped areas fenced off so that the plantings would survive for a significant period of time, meaning 1,000 children were searching for places to hang out, I'll say. And we had a punch list a mile long that we had to contend with. In addition, the administrative team was impacted by the promotion of both assistant principals to principalships, one of them happening very late in the game here, with Pierangeli moving over to Terman about I don't know, 10 days before school started. So that was a little bit of an impact. And of course, Becky was on maternity leave, having gone into labor just around the time we were getting ready for our leadership retreat. So the entire staff did rally and supported one another. However, we started the year off feeling a little bit behind, and that was definitely palpable and something that was hard to overcome. Although the year was a challenging one, we were able to rise to the occasion, and we did tackle many of the goals we set out to achieve. While we did not meet every goal, our efforts once again led to invaluable interactions and conversations with one another, which has deepened our work and made our time spent together even more meaningful. I've selected just a few of these accomplishments to highlight for you in greater depth this morning, and before I share them, I just want to, like Greg, share a little story. So years ago, when I first became an administrator, the management team had a leadership retreat, and we were working with a management consultant known as his name is Bob Sadler, who facilitated the retreat. I don't know, some of you may remember him. He worked with HP when HP acquired Compaq so that the two companies could come together. Long dating myself here, but he focused on how to build successful teams that work together, build strong relationships, and implement a roadmap for their vision. As a young and new administrator, I was struck most when he spoke about how change works in relation to S-curves. At the start of an initiative, you design your plan of action, build momentum, scale up, as you can sort of scale up your successes, stretch your reach, and then reflect and refine before you trail off. And then when you reflect and refine, hopefully you jump to the next S-curve and keep going. If you don't, then you trail off, and who knows what happens. Maybe things don't go so well. So it was in this last phase that it is most critical to determine what the next step is, and while still maximizing the current work being done. And the reason why I bring this up is because that is where JLS spent most of its time last year, is trying to figure out how to jump to that next S-curve. We were working first to understand and then transition into the Common Core state standards and the next generation science standards, while also working to provide a solid academic and social emotional foundation for all of our students. And that is, there's a funny video out that we can all look up. It's about building an airplane while it's in flight, and that is kind of how it feels sometimes. In my presentation today, I chose to focus on and highlight some items that are not necessarily identified or highlighted in the evaluation of the goals that is presented to you and is available online to everyone, but still warrant some serious recognition. So in terms of collaboration, the structure of JLS is designed to support collaboration. Greg mentioned a lot of these items, so I'm not going to repeat them, but it's very similar between all three schools, actually, which is something we discuss a lot. We also have a lot of common prep times built into the schedule so that teams of teachers can meet. We have co-teaching teams of teachers that have common prep times so that they can meet. We have the Wednesday afternoons developed and designed around coming together in varying forms of teams so that people can collaborate and share ideas. And Greg did mention the math steering committee, and I really would also like to acknowledge their collaboration this past year. The middle schools worked with the high schools to sit down and dissect the Common Core state standards and redesign and redistribute all of the expectations for learning across the grade levels. And they ended up coming up with a really excellent 4-year implementation plan, which they literally started the next day. And all of the teachers across all of the middle schools and the 2 high schools are working off of that plan, and it was a really amazing collaborative effort that I think warrants some really serious recognition. They're very, very solid, and the changes led to some course title changes and whatnot, but we have a really clear path to follow, and I'm thankful to all of the ISs for doing that and making sure that everyone was in consensus and everyone adheres to the plan. So collaboration is what I would refer to as a cross-cutting theme throughout everything that we do at JLS, so you'll hear a lot about that. It comes up in supporting all students. At JLS, we continue to support and work with struggling students through using the teaming structure that's in place. Those meetings happen weekly, and one of the agenda items always is to discuss students of concern. I shared last year that we were using a template across the entire school, the same one template for documenting interventions. That continues to be used. However, we debated the merits of working with just the one template that was specific versus opting to have teams of teachers have flexibility to provide information in a way that's easier for them. So while the components are the same, they all look a little different. They're usually in a Google Doc, and that gets shared with all of the PE and electives teachers as well for contributions and input. And the teams of teachers have found those conversations now to be less cumbersome in terms of the tracking of the information, and much more productive in terms of their conversation. So that's just one of those pieces where you think you're doing the right thing, and we are, but then you don't realize how the nature of sticking to this one form is really going to impact the conversation. So we've decided to, and Anne worked on that quite a bit last year with going to individual team meetings and observing them and giving them feedback and seeing how they were discussing and what worked for each team, because each team sort of has its own personality when they meet. What is consistent is the sort of cycle of inquiry that's used in terms of looking at students and their performance. And so there's analyzing the information and the data, how students are performing, and then asking some reflective questions about how we're supporting students. Reviewing, evaluating, collaborating on strategies that were tried before and determining whether or not they are helpful. And if they're helpful in one area, how can we spread that into other areas and help the student perform successfully in all of their courses. If that measurement of success is working, then what is it that caused that piece of success to happen, and how do we spread it? If it's not being met, then rather than saying, okay, we'll keep going, then we designate someone to figure out what is it that this student needs to do, what is it that we can help them with, how do we find a new strategy rather than continuing along the same pathway and just hoping that it works. And if a strategy previously identified is not working, you know what? Let's just brainstorm a way to get a new strategy on the plate. And that might mean talking to someone outside of your team, or talking to someone in another school, or calling the 5th grade teacher if you're 6th grade. So all of those kinds of pieces are in place in that second phase of reflection and asking questions. And then, of course, the third phase of instruction and intervention, tracking the improvements and seeing what's going on and making sure that we are consistent with each other, and then circling back. Last year, we also implemented a comprehensive RTI plan that was developed with our previous assistant principal, who's sitting in the back also, Barbara Harris. She joined us in October of, well, I think end of September, early October of last school year, and she came with a wealth of experience from a number of schools that were required by the state to have some pretty rigid RTI plans. So Anne, Lori, and myself and Barbara all sat down, and we ended up developing a nice comprehensive plan that outlines all of the things that we do, from the goals that we have to the programs we offer to the different types of groupings that are available, the frequency with which those opportunities are provided, assessments we use to see if students are doing better, reviewing data, available resources that might be beyond our period of time that we have with the students, what the next steps might be if they're not doing well, how to advance or move back along that pyramid of intervention. And we developed those for math and literacy. And for this year, we are reviewing those and working on making sure that they're current and trying to leverage them a little bit more. We developed it last year, so it didn't get implemented until later in the year. And we're working this year to figure out a way to make that be much more of a driving force. I would say that our February Staff Development Day was a huge moment for JLS. I feel like that in reflection was the time when we literally, I felt us like jump to the next S curve. So I think that that's very important. I always struggled with the concept of, or the goal that was established a couple years ago around reducing the number of D's and F's for all students. I struggled with that because not that I didn't believe in it, but because I didn't think that's an outcome that we hope for. But for me, the question for JLS was, how are we engaging students? What strategies are we using? How are we increasing student achievement? So grades to me are and I hate to say this, but grades to me can be very subjective. And even if with all the consistency in the world, sometimes there's discrepancies. And so to look at D's and F's just didn't sit right. So I was out trying to figure out what is the right question to be asking. And in this time, as Charles referenced, this exciting time of education that is also sometimes a little bit daunting, we're changing things anyway. So why not, as we're changing things, sort of look at new ways to do things and leverage that opportunity. So we had a day where we spent time exploring the concepts of teaching versus learning. Like, if you can teach all day, but are your children learning? And if your students are learning, how do you know? Through assessment. Well, what kind of assessments are you giving? And then once you have those assessments, how are you grading them? And the only thing I asked of the staff, the only request, was that they enter into the day with an open mind and a growth mindset. And I have to say that experience was so impactful that it is still talked about on a daily basis at JLS. And several people have taken the ball and run with it, and others are definitely talking about it. We're in many different phases of implementing some significant changes that are impacting student learning, which I'm excited about, and we've spent a lot of time this first quarter working on. The opportunities exist to shift our practices right now, and so I think people are really reflecting on that and trying to incorporate that in all the changes that we're making. I'm going to move on to the JLS English department, which I've shared the work with you for several years. We are currently in our 4th year of working on our work around writing at JLS. The English department has continued to better align their instructional practices around the teaching of writing. As a result of the teachers' shared experience with writing, administering, and scoring a self-developed common assessment, the department agreed that it was best to rewrite the assessments last year so they were more smarter, balanced-like, and performance task-oriented. Based on the experience from year one of a common assessment, it was also decided that the rubric needed to be revised. After spending a day reviewing the merits of different types of rubrics and using student papers from year one to sort of test drive possible other alternatives, the department members agreed to a holistic rubric, and that rubric is now known as the JLS Writing Rubric. It is published in the JLS Writing Handbook, used in classrooms as writing is being taught, and has been adopted by other departments that are also assigning content-specific writing. So one rubric across the board that's being used for the most part with very, very little customization for discipline only. This past year, for the first time, all student papers were scored by 2 readers. Our first time around with a common assessment, we didn't score all of the papers. We had to calibrate our rubric and figure some things out. Last year, every single paper was scored by 2 different readers. This gave teachers an opportunity to examine how their students performed. This led to a lot of conversation amongst teachers within grade levels, but also across the grade levels. High school teachers from both Palo and Gunn did participate in scoring the 8th grade papers. That experience proved to be invaluable for 8th and 9th grade teachers. The 8th grade teachers felt validated in their instruction of writing based on their interactions with those teachers, and the 9th grade teachers were impressed with the process, the assessment itself, and the quality of writing that was produced, to the point where this past Saturday I was in a store in Los Altos and I bumped into a Pali English teacher who commented on it to me, and that day was held back in March of last year. So very, very lasting impression and a lot of amazing feedback for us at JLS, and I think also positive impact on English teachers across the board at the secondary level here. Our common writing assessment continues to be in the genre of response to literature. We've developed a prompt and a rubric. We've administered the assessment. We've received student feedback about that assessment. We've calibrated the rubric. This year we just spent yesterday actually, Eston and I spent the day with the English teachers refining the assessment. Most of the changes are related to teacher directions to make sure that the experience is as common as possible from room to room. And they participated in what I've been referring to as a data dialogue. Now, doing a data dialogue with people who use words to do everything was daunting for me. But I have to say it was a phenomenal experience, and the head of the department was in my office just this morning sharing how amazing she thought it was and how happy she was that we did that data dialogue, analyzing an entire grade level of data and figuring out with no judgment what that data meant, and what that data shows and how it can be used to influence their instruction moving forward. So rich conversations that are invaluable are happening regularly at JLS, especially around the teaching of writing. The teachers are excited to teach language arts. They enjoy collaborating with each other. And the new members of our department, like Greg, we hired, I think, 16 new people this past summer. So we have several new department members. Each of them have been involved and are jumping right in and sharing their own experiences. And there's a really open framework for that contribution to be accepted and to be worked with. At this point, I think a lot of our teachers are also interested in having cross-curricular conversations with their colleagues about writing in other subjects, and that came out yesterday as well, even from the English teachers, how they want to work on things with their kids to support writing in other disciplines. The JLS Writing Handbook last year was published for the first time. It was a draft form. Again, we used it in classrooms. We learned a lot, and an entire team of people sat down for another week this past summer and revised the entire booklet. And it is even better. We learned which pages were used, which pages weren't used. This page was good, but that needed this. So people are working with it. It is still in a draft form. We're not committed to doing. We want to test drive the changes that we made and make sure they're working. This year, however, we've more than tripled the quantity of teachers who are actually using the contents of the writing handbook in classroom instruction on a daily basis. So things are going really well, and Anne has spearheaded that group and has been working with them. She did turn it into a PDF, so it's available on Schoology homepages for English teachers, and kids can download it to their home devices and use it to support their writing when they're doing writing at home as well. So we've come a long way with the writing handbook, but one more time, it is in a revision year. I feel like by the end of this school year, we'll have one more go around this summer, and then it'll be solid. And we are hoping to turn it into an iBook so that it can really be housed on any device. We did also have some teachers participate, 3 new teachers participate in the Teachers College Institute this past summer. So that supports some writing work being done at JLS as well. I'll move on to the safe and welcoming schools aspect of our community. I think JLS is doing an amazing job and a phenomenal job. We continue to work throughout the school with student groups. BECHA, which stands for Be the Change, is the student advisory committee that works with the guidance counselors to suggest ideas for school-wide activities that will influence positive changes. We continue to have 5 focal assets from the Project Cornerstone Developmental Assets Framework. Student recognition programs, leadership students are working more collaboratively with both student council and the BECHA group. So our leadership teams have grown, and they're much more collaborative, and whenever there's a team of kids there to help you, you don't know what class they're from or what organization they're from. They're just there to help you, and so that's tremendous and wonderful. We have launched in full force the Kindness is the Norm campaign last year. There's an anonymous link on our website with an anonymous way to report kind things, all the goodness that you see happening. So we're trying to, as those of you who know me well know that I'm a big fan of the social norms concept and social norm science, and that if we promote the positive, then that, and we make that what we talk about, rather then that becomes the normalizing behavior. So we kids have submitted hundreds, literally hundreds. I just checked it this morning. It's continuing this year, but hundreds of kind acts that they saw throughout the school year. And I'll just read, I picked 3 of them. So here are 3 examples. And what we did is we took these and we posted them on bright color neon paper and posted them around the school last year. And we changed them on a fairly regular basis. So here are some examples. Today I was biking when I completely crashed, and 2 girls I have seen before but I did not know immediately came over to me to make sure I was okay. It made me feel a lot better. When I was biking to school, I forgot my lunch. A girl gave me money for hot lunch. She was really nice. She told me sometimes she forgets her lunch. Later that day, my lunch was in the office, and I gave her money back. It's middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I mean, these are the kind of things that we don't hear about that kids do for each other all the time. Here's one last one. The student used a specific student name. So this young man is very good at being a friend and helps me when I am down and motivates me to do my work. So I couldn't be more thankful for the community that we work in and having the opportunity to interact with kids who are really looking for the good in each other on a regular basis. I am equally happy to work with our PTA, who is phenomenal and amazing, and we have partnered for years. I don't even know, since my 7th year at JLS, and I think it's our 7th time doing this. It's a service learning project, and that is one of no one asset is more important than the other, but they do suggest that the service learning aspect of things is a gateway asset. So I'm happy to say that this past year, the PTA focused on the theme of spread the kindness, and they launched kids out for 3 hours one day after school on a Wednesday to local agencies to do work with those agencies. Everything from preparing a meal for the homeless to making blankets for the Humane Society to entertaining senior citizens at Stevenson House to visiting the VA hospital and delivering cookies and flowers to patients there. Transition programs continued at JLS. I think we all know about all of those, so I'm going to skip over that and conclude with just how happy I am that we work so diligently to meet the needs of all students on our campus academically, socially, emotionally, and physically. We strive to teach our kids to be thinkers and problem solvers, and we're dedicated to ensuring that every student has success to a quality education and caring, listening adults. At any given time at JLS, there are over 120 staff members who are eager to work with our students and help them become not just scholars, but respectful, responsible citizens who will change our world for the better moving forward. So we're committed to working with these students and helping them become world citizens and teaching them that kindness is the norm.
Oh, no, now it's on. Thank you. Thank you to both Greg and to Sharon, and good morning, everyone. I'm Pierangeli Laplace, and I'm here in my 2nd year as principal of Terman Middle School. I'm very delighted to say that. I want to let you know that I remain just as inspired on a daily basis by our incredible staff, our students, our parents, all who call Terman our community. And I want to begin with acknowledging the assistant principal from last year, Bhavna Narula, for her leadership, and also to introduce and to acknowledge and thank our current administrative team that includes Tanya Bailey, our assistant principal, and Jim Cox, who is new to a full-time administrative TOSA position, but certainly not new to Terman Middle School as well. I really appreciate their dedicated leadership and their hard work as an effective middle school leadership team. So thank you so much for being here. I want to say Sharon mentioned that I became principal at Terman. She said, I think you said within 10 days. I think it was a little bit longer, but it was certainly only within weeks of the opening of school. And yeah, not that much longer. And I was listening to you tell the travail of construction, and I will say that I was greeted by a very welcoming staff, but also greeted by construction challenges. I found that I was the third principal, Catherine Baker. Thank you so much for being the principal prior to me at Terman Middle School. But I was the third principal. Bhavna was our second assistant principal, and the project manager was the fourth project manager, needing to complete construction. And I found that there were significant instructional spaces that were not going to be ready for the opening of school. So quite at the beginning, much of my energy and focus was devoted to making certain that we had those classroom spaces ready. And I'm really glad to say that through the work of many people, that was accomplished for the opening of school. I want to also acknowledge that something unique about Terman is that when Palo Alto's enrollment declined and some of our middle schools were closed, and we landed with JLS, in fact, being the only middle school, and then Jordan reopening, and then eventually Terman reopening. Terman reopened with a principal and a team of people visioning for an entire year to conceptualize what Terman would become. I, in fact, and Sharon, to an extent, were a part of that visioning. It's a little-known fact of what eventually became Terman. Why I mention that is both Sharon and Greg have mentioned the large numbers of staff that they have added to their staff over the last couple of years. And what I'll say is unique about Terman is actually we've had tremendous consistency in our staff. There's a large percentage of Terman staff who are, and I love this expression, referred to as the originals. and I jokingly say, I've shared this in a number of places, prior to last year, my only point of reference for that phrase was the Temptations singing group, one of the original Temptations. But I share that because there's a kind of iconic reference to being a part of the original group that conceptualized Terman. It means that there's a rich history of strength, a dedication to inclusion in our mission statement, to a respectful and kind and caring community, and certainly that is evidenced on a daily basis at Terman. What that also means is that in my first year, and again in this year, what I found is that those staff that have come at a different time, including myself being being very new, looking to find ways that we could integrate ourselves. So this last August, our professional development focused on what I called a walk-through time. We actually went back to what it would have been like in the year 2000, 2001, when Terman was reopening, and together as a full staff, the originals to the people who had been hired literally 3 days before school opened, we looked at what was not only going on at Terman, but in the district, in the world, and in our lives. It was an amazing experience, one that is still talked about among staff. It was a very powerful way to affirm that Terman, although we have changed and evolved, we are no longer 20 people, that was the staff, and about 100 students and 1 grade level, that in fact what makes Terman essentially Terman remains. It was also a way of being able to introduce to those of us that are newer what that actually means. What is our commitment to our mission, to supporting our students, to ensuring that we are as focused on the development of our students' character, who they're becoming as people, as we are on what they're learning, their academic success and achievement. I will be addressing, as you've heard from Greg and Sharon, our cohesive themes of collaboration, meeting the needs of all students, and creating safe and welcoming schools, highlighting our efforts from last year, and that has informed our work going forward for this year. As you've heard from all three of us, a foundational structure at middle school is teaming. And we are dedicated to that structure in its purity at Terman. With our increasing enrollment, coming together with the staff, we agreed that we wanted to keep our teams pure, meaning that a set of core academic teachers and PE teachers share the same set of students, allowing for deep conversation around student support, collaboration, and an opportunity to really get to know those students well, creating a sense of a small school community. And even though we are the smallest of the three middle schools, trust me, 720 or more students still feels large unless you can create those teaming experiences for our students. As you have heard, Common Core necessitates collaboration, and it has afforded us a wonderful opportunity to even deepen our practice of being able to observe one another, get into our classrooms, to have conversations, as I really like to think of it, and as a teaming partner of mine used to always say, if the students are not learning the way we teach, how can we change our teaching to meet the way they learn? And that has really afforded us an opportunity through Common Core to do some of that deepening work. Similar to what Greg mentioned, one of the things that, if anybody knows me, is really important, I know my staff is going to smile at this, is reflective feedback. Really being able to position ourselves where whatever we have initiated or what may have already been in inception for some time can be reflected upon, and that we can build on an understanding of what's working, what is supporting our students, what is supporting the deep work that teachers do, and what might we need to change to better meet those students' needs. So we pretty much reflect on absolutely everything, and it has really been invaluable to inform our work going forward. And we have, together as a staff, created some significant changes, or at least investigating some of those, and I'll highlight some of those for you. In meeting the academic needs of all students, again, we are continuing to offer rich electives. This year we've added Money Matters. I want to thank the JLS Math Department for creating that course. It has been well received by our students participating in everything from stock market investigations to being able to look at banking practices, as well as consumerism and how money actually matters in their lives. I'm wondering if it's reshaping conversations about allowances at home. We haven't quite figured that out yet. In addition to our enrichment opportunities, such as math contests, spelling bee, academic clubs, creative writing and math club, and at Terman, clubs are initiated by students. Students suggest a club, and then staff steps up to help support that. So when I say creative writing club and math club, I want you to know that those were student-generated ideas for clubs. And I'm very happy that those are continuing. Some of our after-school interventions, such as Math Advantage, and I really want to thank Becky Ray and Paul Jorgens for their dedicated work to keeping that Math Advantage program going. Our homework habitat, which we have an after-school homework or intervention support at all three of our campuses. Terman's has been revamped this year, including for the first time a full-time coordinator, increased credentialed staffing, and a greater communication between staff who might be recommending a student for after-school interventions and what those supports practically look like in those after-school interventions. I'm really proud of that work, and again, very much initiated by Beth Carlson, working together with the administrative team to accomplish that. With the support of Judy Argametto's office, we are also offering math and literacy tutoring, targeting some of our underrepresented minority students who, in our work on supporting all academic needs of all students, we have found were not achieving and not being recognized for their talents at in the way which we felt comfortable with or would want them to. And so we have brought some focused attention to being able to look at that as a comprehensive school. Last year, we asked ourselves some essential questions on how we could better meet the needs of all students. And through multiple collaborative discussions, strategic planning, we arrived at some key implementations for this year. Our special education case managers for the first time are looping alongside of counselors. So they, along with our counselors, are moving through each grade level, providing for 3 years of support and collaboration for both students and for families, really deepening their awareness of students' needs and being able to better facilitate adherence to IEPs and 504s through that process. Our 2013 inclusion goal had us moving from no periods of co-teaching into at least 2 sections of co-teaching. And I want to say that at Terman, one of the challenges of being on the big side of small is a rather tight master schedule. We don't have the flexibility of multiple periods and multiple sections across all grade levels. So I believe that master schedule creation takes wizardry no matter where you are at the secondary level, but I think you mentioned Hogwarts earlier. Master wizardry to be able to accomplish multiple achievements in a very tight middle school master schedule when you're the size of Terman. So one of those things that I'm very proud of the staff coming together to do this is that we now have 4 sections of co-teaching. And that was definitely accomplished through trainings with the support of Chara Perry, Tara Keith, and Holly Wade's support, setting aside a full day, first at 7th and 8th grade, and then another full day at 6th grade for both training in what co-teaching could be, and then the remainder of the day with the staff doing the work of envisioning what that could mean for Terman and what it might look like. So at the 8th grade level, we have a co-teaching section in math. We have a co-teaching section in science. At the 7th grade level, we have a co-teaching section in history, social studies, and at the 6th grade level in history, social studies, and English language arts. And the determination of which of the core subject areas was again through visiting student data on performance, where we determined that students were struggling at which grade level and which core content level, and drawing on the strengths of both our content experts, but also our inclusion experts among our staff. And this year we are dedicated to continuing to deepen those efforts, not just in the potential to expand sections, but in that training. As it was mentioned, it takes years of commitment to co-teaching to really apply it with fidelity and to develop those relationships, so it's a authentic experience of having 2 credentialed teachers supporting students in content achievement, but also in full inclusion. I'm very proud of that work. This year, in addition of reviewing last year our ELL program and seeing that we had some gaps in our fidelity to testing, we hired an ELL program coordinator who is working not only with our ELL teacher, but working with our general education students. This was a growth point for Terman as well. Originally, Terman was not an ELL program campus. JLS was the program campus for the district. And over the last 3 years, ELL program became also in existence at Terman, beginning first with only 6th grade students, then adding 7th grade, and last year 6th, 7th, and 8th grade program. So this full-time, our ELL program coordinator allows for that communication between the general education classroom for students who are exiting, being RFEP'd into general education, but also establishing a wonderful collaboration and connection between content experts and our ELL sheltered English and social studies curriculum. Huge strength that has been exceedingly well received for that work to be done between our general education and ELL staff. And I want to acknowledge Tanya Bailey as our site coordinator for ELL and her help to thread between that work, or among that work, I should say. I also want to acknowledge Judy Argometto and Kelly Carnavali for their support of our growing and strengthening ELL program. So we have.
Angeli,
Mhm.
could you just say what RFEP is? Because I
Sure.
think
It's
some
redesignated
people
fluent
watching.
English proficiency, meaning that our students are scoring on multiple measures, but scoring at a high enough level to no longer warrant sheltered English language development instruction, and where they might just then go into a general education classroom, we are bringing great intentionality to how that transition is accomplished. And that's accomplished in a number of ways. Again, master schedule wizardry. We have scheduled our ELL classes and our ALD classes, academic language development classes, in the same period line by grade level, so that students do not have to have an overall of their entire schedule once they are eligible to transition into those programs. In addition to that, those ELD classes, we are finding this is where much of the work of being able to marry the curriculum that's being administered in the general education class is now being brought into those ELL classes and ALD classes, so that when students do transition out from English language development program, they are not significantly behind in the curriculum that they would be experiencing. It's quite a strengthening of the program. I'm really quite proud of the staff for the work that they've invested in this. In addition, we built the master schedule for common preparation periods among our special education staff. This has afforded them the opportunity to have great communication around what it means to be at each one of those grade levels in support of students. They are also now able to attend our team meetings and participate in the discussions around some of our focal students or students who may be struggling academically as well. We also built common period lines at both 7th and 8th grade level for math instruction at both levels of math. This then means that students are able to be regrouped within 7th grade and 8th grade, both for reteaching, reinforcement, and enrichment. In addition, through a day-long collaborative effort, very involved conversation among our 6th grade teachers with the intersection of counselors, of the ELD teacher, of our case managers, the 6th grade teachers decided to create a flex period. This is new for term in middle school. And this flex period scheduled very intentionally in a period line where we can now offer a study skills or academic strategies class for 6th grade students for the first time. That same period line is where we have scheduled our ALD class for 6th grade, and it is the same period line in which we are now offering our our writing center literacy intervention. So that means that we have much more flexibility in being able to meet the needs of students on an individualized basis because the master schedule supports being able to do so. We have a number of meetings. Again, you've heard mention of HST meetings. We also have those. We find them very powerful meetings of bringing together counselors, ACS, the district nurse, our school psychologist, to our administrative team to be able to look at what are the specific needs of students and how we might meet those, sort of thinking, again, outside of the box. We have increased our parent education, particularly targeting Spanish-speaking parents and our parents who may reside in East Palo Alto, holding evening meetings. Our most recent Spanish-speaking parent meeting included Judy Argometto coming to address A through G requirements and college readiness, and that intersection with middle school specific to both math placements as well as world language choices at the middle school level. The Writing Center has been a literacy support that was also revamped this year. The teachers who've been dedicated to that program, including Victoria Blockus, Tristan Giannani, Deanna Jones, came together with administration to sort of revision how can we better meet the needs of students, particularly our students who may be having transportation issues after school, leaving our campus and are not able to remain for some of our after-school supports. How could we better utilize the day in order to be able to meet those needs? So for the first time, our Writing Center is being offered both during our advisory periods at 7th and 8th grade at targeted advisory classes where we've identified that we have students who have that literacy need, but also, again, utilizing our 6th grade flex period, both for interventions as well as Becky Ray, our math IS, has arranged for a Stanford professor to come in to also to do some enrichment with our students. So I'm getting a signal of timing. Seems like the time went by very quickly. So let me please get to safe and welcoming schools. And I will say that for Terman, again, our hallmark has been our mission statement and our social kindness program. So very briefly saying that social kindness program, we have found that our school is a very safe campus, that our students report that they feel exceedingly safe. But through some student surveys last year and parent focus groups and parent coffees and the like, one of the areas that we identified a need for is to infuse our social kindness with resiliency and with healthy coping skills. That work has begun this year. We're very, very dedicated to it, as well as continuing our ability awareness lessons, our proactive anti-bullying lessons. I will just mention that Not in Our Schools Week for this year will be in collaboration with Gunn High School. It occurred to me, and this is how I'm referring to it, as the 2-block walk, that perhaps we could do some walking in that direction and they could do some walking in our direction. We are scheduling it in the same week, and we'll be coordinating some activities in our efforts to address that. And then lastly, I would just say at Terman, we have what we call Recognition Night. We are very dedicated as a school to making sure that all of our students feel valued, all of them feel recognized. And one of the ways that we're providing that opportunity is by moving from a pilot to our fully launched e-portfolio program this year, in which all students will be able to have the opportunity to demonstrate and reflect on their learning. And lastly, I would just mention that there has been a tremendous effort around common formative assessments, both within our math department and our English department. Using a full year of dedicated time, we have common writing assessments, common rubrics, which have been fully calibrated at all 3 grade levels at Terman. The 6th grade is revamping theirs to move from narrative to argumentative writing, but it is very solid, and that work is now moving into all content areas, all of them, using that rubric. So, in conclusion, what I would like to do is to thank Max, thank the board, thank Charles, Catherine, Barbara. Just the list is endless. They say it takes a village, so if I were to do that, I would be naming just about everybody in this room and many others. I think that you have heard that the 3 of us, Greg, Sharon, and I, are very dedicated to continuing our efforts and are very proud of the work being done at all of our sites to support our students, to meet the academic needs of all of our students, to further embed and deepen the collaboration work that's being done among our amazing group of professional educators at our campuses, and to continue to create and strengthen the safety and the welcoming atmospheres and climates at our schools. I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am to Sharon and to Greg, and we have met a number of times this year and will continue to meet with one another because our work together collaboratively, along with Denise and Kim as the secondary principals in our district, is rich work, it is challenging work, It's exciting work, and it is so worth it. We invite you to come to our schools anytime. Please do come in and join us, and we thank you very much.
Yeah, I do. It's a three-way clap. Three-way clap. And it is so unfair to ask you, again, I'm reminded every year, to boil down the work and accomplishments and envisioning and capture all the work that is going on in your schools in 20 minutes. So I think you did amazingly in an hour and 15. So, and the pride you have in your staff, the affection you have for your schools, it's just palpable. And I think we're all feeling that and so appreciative. As Dr. McGee says, the principals in our schools are the most important leadership element in our district, in our community, and the three of you represent that so well. Couple of takeaways, and then we'll get on to board questions, and hopefully utilize your time together with us and hear your responses to some of these questions. But one little takeaway too, you were all telling stories. It again, with the context of kids who are now in their 20s and my husband and I who went to school here, 50 years ago, I'm always reminded of how you can't measure your work in minutes, clearly, the accomplishments you make. But even since our kids were in the district, the kinds of changes, structural changes that exist to support students in our middle schools is just tremendously strong. From teaming, the after-school support systems, even the sixth grade structure itself, let alone the orientation programs, and the benefit that we've all gained as parents and community members in the collaborations that you all do. I mean, I think of, teaming is a perfect example, Pierre. When Terman was started and that year planning, that's when teaming was really introduced at the middle school level, and look it's now institutionalized in all three schools. And Sharon, your work with writing is a good example, and Panther Camp was kind of, I believe, you were the first school to introduce that. And Greg, your mark in areas such as Project 45 and Math Rewind, and I'm seeing some of this work with the co-teaching, and the Climate Committee, I think, was first introduced. I could have some of this wrong, but the point is, you're each taking advantage of the traction and needs of your schools. You're developing things that work, and you're sharing them with one another. And every year you have 1,000 new 11-year-olds. And 2 years later, they're all gone. So I think of software development where once you fix a bug, it's a permanent fix for all the users forever, and you're on to continuous evolution of the product or something. In your case, you've got new 11-year-olds every year who are going to always struggle with the same issues that 11-year-olds did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and 5 years from now. So you're having to reboot every year, and it's such a relationship-based work that you do. We're so grateful. Anyway, thank you for the excellent presentations. Board members, I think you'll give us maybe 15 extra, so we don't have to, we can still plan for an hour. I'm wondering, again, to take advantage of the wisdom of these three, I'm wondering if it would work to do around 1 or 2 questions apiece, and then go to the board and let our principals address the questions, so that we can all benefit from each other's questions as well as their responses. I will put that out there as an option. Last year, I know we had a lot of questions. We ran out of time to really hear from our principals, which so something to think about. Let's start down at the far end there, Mr. Tom.
Okay.
Oh, and if I may, we have a card. And also,
on the cards, let the board go first. I'd like to hear from my colleagues, and then maybe.
Sure. And if anyone would like to speak, just fill out a card and hand it in at a table, and we'll introduce that after board comments. All right, Mr. Tom, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This was such an energizing experience, perhaps even better than a second cup of coffee. With a nod to Max, but I mean, your passion and thoughtfulness just come through loud and clear, and I love it. I appreciate the evaluation of results from last year and learning from those for this year's plan. I think that's great. And I agree with the point of setting goals, that the point of setting goals is not just to set a slam dunk goal that you complete. It's to use them to help you prioritize efforts and achieve the most you can. So I applaud that. I'm always delighted to hear the word collaboration. And in this case, particularly with its multiple dimensions, it's within your teaching teams, it's within your schools, and it's between your schools. And I think it's also important that you've demonstrated that you have such intention behind it. That's a systemic element of how you run your schools, because that's much better than just leaving it to serendipity. So that's great. I also completely support the focus on learning beyond simply teaching. That's focused on outcome, on output rather than input. And you change your input to get the output you want. And so that's I like that. So I'll focus on one question that's sort of multi-part in a way. So then that'll deal with it. But it's all about one thing. So I'm pleased to see that each school is emphasizing writing instruction, and that each has a goal about it in your plans. And I heard an example of collaboration of JLS sharing its writing handbook with Jordan. So my question about this is, I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you're collaborating or leveraging each other's work. Okay, that's one. The other aspect is, what role should the district play? Okay, and the last part is how you think you will achieve alignment between your schools, because that is one of our global district-wide goals.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tom. Ms. Townsend.
Mine's not going to be quite so succinct, but you can tell we're energized. You guys are smacked it out of the park. This is pretty exciting stuff. I'm going to tell Ms. Mitchell how much I'm going to miss her when she's off the board. Her wisdom and longevity and visualizing those 11-year-old kids, we're going to miss you.
Oh, thank you, Ms.
Yes, and any metaphor and simile she would bring along is really helpful. And Ms. Mitchell is absolutely correct and truly has been hit home. I've been on the board over a decade. Clearly, it's the principals that make and can break a school, and you guys just, we are so proud of you. Thank you. Anyway, you really delivered today. So my big picture questions are really, and you're not going to be surprised, are on content mastery and content learning. And I'll tell you, everybody's into stories. You know what? I remember, I'm from a family of 8 kids. I remember one of my brothers brought home a D once, and my dad said, "Oh, dog there, right? Dog, D, dog. We won't see that again, will we?" And I just want you to know that grades do matter to parents, and you're in collaboration with parents, and I really appreciate the numbers. Greg, I appreciate that was your focus, D's and F's, everybody's. And how do we get those down? I remember Scotty Lawrence at Palo Alto High School. He was the first one I remember in chatting with principals about that being a focus, and it's a monitor that we understand, as subjective as it may be. Parents and teachers kind of understand that's not where you want to be. So I appreciate that work. I'd like you to talk to it any more if you have some comments about that. In terms of math instruction and writing instruction, I was intrigued, all of your embracing, and thanks to the steering committee, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that collaboration, math, English, high school and elementary school. I get the sense that that's the steering committee, and if someone can just talk about that just a little bit more. In terms of writing, I'm interested in that we appear to be creating our own Elements of Style handbook, and I'd like to know, I came up on Elements of Style, and I still hand it out to people in terms of basic grammar, paragraphs, word, verb, help me. Yeah, anyway, yeah. Anyway, all that kind of stuff. And so I am interested in looking at that handbook and what our vision for that is. I'm interested in using tried and true and how we work from that in our district. And so I'm really interested in that. And let's see, love the wizardry, all three of you using that similar metaphor, as the case may be. And the last thing, in terms of beautiful campuses, I loved how each of you talked about both your challenges and the work on, thank you, both of you. Don't think we don't understand that the principal is such a hard role, because you're not only handling students, parents, teachers, those who you report to, the community, and all that additional bond money and construction. You really are wizards in, or puppet, handling the puppets along the way. Puppet masters. I mean, it's for you guys to do it. It's really a brilliant, hard and brilliant job when you do it well, and you guys come always struggling. So I just wanted to appreciate that you've laid it out for us. It is true. So those are my big ticket things. There's a lot I can say, but if we're doing a first round, that's my first round.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Townsend.
Thank you so much. I want to just build a little bit on what Mr. Tom was saying, and actually Ms. Townsend as well. There's always the difference between a sort of sharing best practices and growing best practices. And I'm wondering how those conversations go across schools. It feels like each of your schools is growing best practices with creating writing rubrics or assessments. And I'm wondering where innovation meets dissemination in terms of sharing versus growing. So just how you have those conversations and what context in which you have those. Because I think we run into that at all levels, right? The high school levels, we've had many a conversation about guidance curriculum over the past few years, and sharing best practices across schools versus growing them so everyone feels ownership in their development. So I'd just like to get a sense of that, how that works as well. I am so excited to hear more about 8-9 articulation, not just because I have an 8th grader, but but yeah, wondering about that cliff into high school. And I think actually over the last 2 years that I've been on board, we have specifically requested more information on that articulation, because we have focused so much on 5-6 articulation and the development of the transition programs, and now those are all developed at all 3 schools. So now it's so great, and thank you, Kim, for being here, Kim Diorio, and just principal of Palo, thank you, for those who don't know, and to really think about working backwards in terms of what is the preparation needed. Not backwards, but foundational skills leading to higher level skills, to Ms. Townsend's point about content mastery. It's such a great benefit of working in a pre-K-12 district that we can watch students grow over time and see where those things need to happen. So thank you for saying that, and I would also like to hear more about how that is growing, because I see it worked with math, so. And then just one other, just maybe smaller question is the co-teaching efforts that are going on. Do any of those work with our athletic programs, our PE department? Because oftentimes when you're talking about inclusion and school climate and social emotional issues, they may come up during sports or team activities, and so I'm wondering how specialists, special ed teachers work with general ed teachers in athletics as well. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I say this every year. This is one of my favorite board meetings. And I look at Ms. fact, I sort of feel like we have grown up together at this table. When I came in 7 years ago, you were a new principal. And Ms. Diorio, I also love the high school meeting as well.
Yes.
But I think there's a special place in heaven for middle school teachers and administrators. It's not just about teaching students at this age. It's about connecting with them where they are. And of course, they're all over the place. You know, you have boys that are this high, you have girls that are this high, you have kids that could teach the class, you have kids that can barely make it to school, let alone reach into their backpack and find anything from their lunch to their money to, whatever. So, I really appreciate that. I think 7 years ago, we sat at this meeting and talked about what do we do to make our large schools feel smaller. Ms. Ofak, I know you understand this and you remember this because every year you've talked about different efforts. We talked about opportunities for leadership and experiential learning for our kids, but more importantly, how do we make sure that our kids feel connected in middle school? What makes them feel connected in middle school? And, of course, we've talked about teaming, but I don't know if you remember 7 years ago talking about, is there anything in a house system that might actually be helpful? And Mr. Barnes, you weren't even here, but you obviously heard about it or intuited it. And you watched Harry Potter. And I have to say, there have been things that have gone on within the team system that might not have been specifically, okay, this team feels like a group and they're going to have their special T-shirts and they're going to feel like they get to do things together and that's their community within the school. And then making it more obvious by saying, let's compete between these different groups in a fun and supportive way. I think we've done a lot of things that have made a huge difference. The Kindness is the Norm program, I just want to call that out because it was 5 years ago when I realized, after hearing this from kids, that the recycle, reuse, and compost program at JLS was a fabulous marketing program. Absolutely fabulous. You couldn't find a kid at JLS that didn't know about composting, reuse, and I'm not saying it right, but recycle, reuse, recycle. And there are many people in this community that now have composting bins that didn't because their kids came home and told them they needed to. I think the Kindness in the Norm, the way you're doing it, could easily have that effect. Because it's not enough for our kids when they're this age to just hear things in the classroom. They sort of have to have the culture surround them. So I think that that's a wonderful effort. And some of the other efforts that you're talking about that you've done in the other schools as well. We didn't even talk about the camp programs at any of the schools this year because we don't need to. They've become part of the culture. And a few years ago, that was a really big part of discussion. How do we help kids move from 5th grade to 6th grade and help them feel connected to their schools? We were at, Dr. McGee and I were at a school the other day when they talked about one of the best things about going to middle school was the camp program, which was, it was unprompted. So my question to you now is I heard about all the great things you're doing. What's your biggest challenge? And how can the board help with that challenge? Because that's probably the most important for us. There's only so many levers that at the high level we can pull that are going to make a big difference, but they could make a huge difference. So I want to thank you. And I have one more question, and that is, we've been talking a lot at the high school level about different ways of teaching and how that goes to where kids are learning. And Common Core being part of that, but not the whole story. There's methodology to make sure that kids can actually problem solve and delve deep in their learning. What is different that's going on in your classrooms, and how are you going to measure it?
Thank you. I'm going to second Melissa's question about challenge. That was mine. The only slight difference I had is you're not allowed to answer time. Um, so recognizing that time is the greatest challenge. So time is the greatest challenge. But in my particular interest had to do with struggling students and inclusion, if you'd want to touch on those two in particular, but any area as well. So I'd like to add my chip to that question. My other question was, given this mind trust that your staffs develop through the team programs, which you're using as the focal strategy for supporting struggling students. And Greg, you really illustrated this in more detail. I know all the schools do it, but it's the opportunity to identify needs and try different strategies. And then you mentioned this. This is your first year. You're passing along that mind trust to Palo. So my question is, how do you capture that mind trust from that your teams have developed, particularly with struggling students, and pass it on to Palo and Gunn?
Miss Mitchell, I forgot one question.
Oh,
Take
well,
me 30 seconds.
Back
20.
to you. Go ahead.
It's the question of the assessment tools that the board, the parents, and the district understand and use as a baseline. ERB, CSTs, what we're doing in lieu of that. I, as a board member, have to have a snapshot of how our district's doing. So if you guys could address that and how we're transitioning to the new assessment tool. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So, Dr. Young or Ms. Baker, is there a way you would recommend we provide some time and an approach for our principals to address some of those questions?
What we did last time, if it works for you, I think you opened it up to the principals and said, is there a question up there that you have interest in, that you would like to, I know you have interest in all of them, but any one of them that you feel particularly drawn to and would like to respond to. Does that work for the board? That's what we did
Perfect.
last year.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Good. Okay.
I think I'll jump in and just talk about, since it came up for, I think, at least 2 or 3 folks, and maybe even all of you, around the sharing of the work that the JLS English department has been doing. So I want to be very clear in saying that the JLS instructional supervisor for the previous 6 years was Kari Nygaard. So that consistency and continuity as we took this project on was amazing and phenomenal, and I don't think we would have had so much success if we had had a change in leadership year after year. We have a new IS this year, Jennifer Caluzzi, who is really doing a phenomenal job. And like I said yesterday, we just got together for the first time this year, and she just picked us up where we were and kept on going. So she's been involved every step of the way as well. So that's been a nice transition. The materials that were created were shared with everyone every step of the way at the steering committee. And to be very, very clear, the steering committees in Palo Alto Unified School District are just at the secondary level, and they are comprised of the instructional supervisors at each school site, Catherine Baker, and sometimes they have guests come and speak and whatnot, but generally it's the 5 ISs and Catherine Baker, or the person in that position, which has been four people in 7 years. So anyway, so
Is this
what I really want to share is that every single revision, every single item that has been produced has been shared. In addition, at the middle school level, the middle school ISs take time out of their schedules to meet outside of that monthly meeting and coordinate with each other. All of the joint middle school meetings, of which we have 3 per year, are planned by those 3 ISs together. They are in sync with one another. In addition to all the writing stuff, they've also been looking at core literature for the last 3 years. So I think it's really important to note that there is a lot of sharing, and then each of those ISs go back to their school and they share out. And each school has taken that information and used it the way they were. I mean, Jordan English Department did create a writing handbook of sorts. It's geared towards the teachers, though. And I literally looked at Greg. I said, just take the JLS one once it's done. I mean, you can have it. And I sent him the PDF of it. So we have the original one and we have the new one. We have shared it across the board. And, you know, to your comment of what's in it, I'm happy to give you a copy of it. But it is tried and true, to use your words. It is presented in a very user-friendly way for children, and that's the idea. When you're 11 and 12 and 13, you know, we are adults. There are adults who aren't comfortable writers. I mean, we spend our lifetimes always working on improving. And so when you're 11, 12, and 13, and you have to write a multi-paragraph essay in response to a prompt that you didn't design, that can be daunting. And so this book is geared towards helping kids with that. And then all of the assessments we are not giving out because we're not interested in recreating them over and over again. But we did hold a parent information night last year, got some feedback on them. You know, again, those are shared every step of the way as we consistently refine what we're trying to do. And then I think these two principals can speak to how they've taken that work and worked with it.
One thing I just want to quickly acknowledge is a few conversations that I think the three of us have appreciated with Charles and Catherine already this year about, you know, the idea of sharing versus growing, as Heidi mentioned earlier. So conversations are underway on a district level as to what are we doing at each of our sites, knowing that we do share a tremendous amount of resources, and then how do we leverage that together to take more of a district focus. So I just wanted to quickly add on to Sharon's brilliant comments about what we're doing with writing across the board, but acknowledge the work of Charles and Catherine in particular.
And I would just add that at the recent Guiding Coalition work that was done at the district, the presenter talked about sacred autonomy. And I think that, you know, in education, it can be a very isolating experience. That's actually the traditional model of education. You get in your classroom and you do what you're doing with your students. Moving so far away from that into the deep collaboration that you've heard about today with consistency, and that you're mentioning has been ongoing efforts for at least 7 years in our district, if not longer, has shifted that mindset. Having said that, I think that authentically as professionals at each site, teachers really want to grapple with their work and what meeting the needs of their students on their campus and what's authentic for a site. And so much of the efforts that you hear are a combination of building on, Sharon has shared with Terman as well, that and her staff has, but also having staff do their work of really looking at what can be achieved at individual sites. And it's a balance. What I will say is that the shift, and I appreciate Max really being straightforward about this, and this is something that I have said for many years. Equity without excellence and excellence without equity is neither. And so as we are developing these continued deepening academic rigor and comprehensive writing programs, if we can look at consistency, it helps to support, and more and often and then not, it is the struggling student that really needs that consistency. I would say, how can that be supported? Common professional learning experiences. If we have isolated efforts at our sites and each site is delving and investigating, whether it's a program, whether it's a process, whether it's a rubric, whether it's an assessment, that's where the energy and focus is going to be. The more we can provide common professional learning experiences and then allowing for staff to really grapple with, you know, what would make meaning at my school, I think we can get there. I think we can get to greater alignment and consistency.
Can I jump in and talk a little bit about something that Ms. Mitchell mentioned earlier at the beginning of the Q&A session, was measuring our work in minutes. I think we measure our work in moments, right? It's those moments with the kids that have a lasting impression on us. We've all had the wonderful evenings where we've sat across the table from a colleague and shared how students have had a lasting impression on us. I think the work then is reminding teachers that you're not going to have one of those moments every day, but it could be one of those moments for your children, right, your students. You work in a building with 1,300 souls, chances are it's going to be a moment for one of those kids, and how do you constantly try to connect with those kids? The reason I bring that up is it relates to the question about what our biggest challenge is, and I think for us, and only speaking for Jordan, it's equity, and it's closing the achievement gap. I think the personal side of that and connecting with kids and who you are as a human being and what you bring into your classroom cannot be understated. We all bring in very specific beliefs that are a result of the stories that we've lived our lives, and I think that's a really important piece when you look at professional development. If you pair that with whatever wonderful systems we have built into our schools, if you add a data piece, for example, you're looking at metrics. If you look at our relationships with our parent communities and what we get from them, their experiences, their feedback, their hope for their children. And then you build in some sort of practice where the PD day just isn't enough. You need to build in a system that won't allow the fervor and excitement of that one day to dissipate over time. So if we continue to ask ourselves, how will we fail? Where are our blind spots? I think we're more apt to impact the lives of our children.
I want to echo that, and that's exactly what I want to share. It's the hugest challenge. I'm going to say, not just for my site, but in our district. When you have such a high-performing district as we have, and we should be proud of that work, with a huge majority of our students performing at such high levels, you know, it is then the challenge to keep our focus where that is not the case. I've been in this district for 25 years. I have the mug to prove it. And the mug. And both as a teacher, as an instructional supervisor for 12 years, and now my 5th year in administration, I will say that it has been my passion, my dedication, personally, being a teacher and educator of color, as well as a parent whose children matriculated through Palo Alto schools. Equity, inclusion. You mentioned around PE and any other ways which we might look at that. It is so important, and in our work this most recent last year and this year, what I invited is that it takes some talk about courageous conversations of being able to bring 2 lenses to this work. One lens I called the binocular view, looking outward at both the challenges and the assets that our students bring, with a particular emphasis on the assets. Such uncovered talent lying in our students, every single one of them. But that point of bravery also becomes what I said, the selfie view. And I did put up the president's image when he was doing the selfie. I think, what was it, Nelson Mandela's funeral? Oh. But at any rate, the selfie view takes a tremendous amount of courage to be able to look at our practices, our institutions, our criteria, our basis for determining levels, all of that mix of how we are supporting our students at the levels that they are and beyond, challenging them, but shoring up and meeting the needs of our students. And I call it not achievement is the end result. For me, it's an access gap. And that's where I feel my greatest challenge.
So I'll chime in on that and just share that at JLS I have the same exact concerns, and I'm not going to reiterate what Greg and Pierangeli have already shared. I'm in full agreement on that, and I will pick up where Pierangeli just left off around that self-view and what are we doing. At JLS, we're this particular year, which you'll get to hear a lot about in a year from now. In this particular year, we are doing that exact thing. We're redirecting the view of the picture right back at ourselves, and I was able to leverage some of that staff development time and experience from last February and say, you know, we keep approaching this from the same, with the same approach. So the thing is, it's still not working. What do we have to do differently? And so we have a lot of people exploring what that might mean and where that is going. And I'm excited about that. There is a lot of excitement at JLS around what the changes are in relation to learning at JLS. And as I've said a number of times this year, and you'll hear me say many more times, is we're trying to cultivate a culture of learning and not a culture of collecting points. And that means that everybody gets to participate. Everybody gets to take ownership of their learning. Everybody gets to get involved. And how do we create that from classroom to classroom? And how do we inspire each other to do that for all of the students that we are honored and able and allowed to work with every day? And I think I like the way that you've phrased that, Piers, like that self-reflection piece of it. We've held the mirror up to ourselves. You know, you can't bang your head against the same wall all the time. We have to look down a different pathway and say, okay, we keep going this way. What if we go this way, the other way? So I'd like to, you know, have the benefit of the rest of this year to figure out what exactly that means. But I think I have a good notion so far based on our first quarter.
So you all have the same challenge that you brought up. Do you all have the same need for support from the board around that challenge? And what would that be?
I get the sense that it's already underway. I feel one of Max's initiatives this year is to form an equity team and to pour over research and make recommendations and get a sense for what's happening at the site. So, which is great. We haven't had that before. So I think we're excited about that.
Yeah, I'm going to just add to that, and this is related. It's related to this, but many other things as well. I personally think it would be really helpful to have a data and assessment person in general for our district. But doing it, I mean, I certainly can do it, but it's that issue of time that we're not allowed to talk about. So I can make a mean graph every now and again, but I don't have the time to do that. But my point in sharing that a data and assessment director would be wonderful. I would love to have someone who is also willing to go really dive in deeply with us and work with us to support our work in this and doing some of that analysis, not just with our work around equity, but with all of our other initiatives as well. You know, it comes up all the time, and it came up twice yesterday. You know, we wanted to look at the writing assessment in a different way, and we wanted to also look at our special education students. It came up in our administrative team meeting yesterday, and I said, who has that data? Where do we get it? How? It is there, but who has a week to go hunt it down? Not one of us. So I actually think that is something that would be really helpful. I know the district is working on finding someone, but I would love to also look at the work that person does, and I'd like to see some of that change a little bit.
So I think that's a perfect segue into the data question that I believe was brought up by you, Camille. So the question was, how do we continue to get grades down? What are some of the conversations that we have? So real quick, when we look at whether it's the AST file or our Project 45 data, the use of data cannot be, it's so important. I'm losing my words at the moment. Understated, thank you. Hello. It's been 2 hours. When we look at the AST file, for example, we look at where there are mismatches between what the student's area of growth is and the way that a unit is constructed within the classroom. When we look at Project 45, for example, if we can break down the old former CST strands and we look at, okay, reading comprehension is a struggle for this kid. So we ask our teachers to look at that data, to think of an upcoming unit and how that unit is structured. So if they have 4 Project 45 kids across their team, and there's a pattern of reading comprehension being an area of growth for them, in other words, they've identified a mismatch, right, between their upcoming unit and reading comprehension. In that, 65% of what they're asking their kids to do is to take that book home, read it, come back with some level of mastery and understanding. That's a problem. There's a mismatch. So we use the data to fine-tune and ask the teachers to reflect on how can I make that accessible for that student. So if they're going to go home and read and come back and not be able to give me the information that I'm looking for, what do I have to do as a teacher to make sure that that's in place? And I think that's consistent across how we approach our ASD file as well. Moving on real quick to your question about articulation with Pally, Kim has been wonderful in giving me an opportunity to go and brag about all the work that people at Jordan, much smarter than I am, have put together over the last 3 years. It's a labor of love. It is one of the reasons why we do what we do, to help all of our kids succeed. And professional development in the past around differentiation has looked like teachers sitting in a computer lab, and they pull up Cruncher and they look at some numbers and, okay guys, now go build more choice into your assignments. Okay, great. And that's it. We can do better than that. And I feel like at Jordan over the last few years, and I know both Terman and JLS have done so as well, is we're really diving into the numbers. The metrics are really important for us, and they help ground all of our tier 1 interventions.
And I would just add that although this may sound a little nebulous, I really mean this in regard to mindsets. Sharon mentioned establishing a culture of continuous learning. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is, both as site administrators, but as Max has definitely brought, Charles and Catherine have continued in the board, to establish with our teachers that we don't run into trial exhaustion. So we've looked at data, we've tried this, it didn't work, let's move on. But that we are willing to, and I love this phrase, Max, that you've used in sharing about the work out of Harvard, relentlessly pursuing student achievement, student access, student talent, and performance. I think that that's really crucial. You know, everyone wants to feel competent at what they do. And so when you present data to teachers, there's always that moment where it can appear as though what I'm saying is that my efforts haven't been good enough. And how can we then move into a space, and I think collaboration, teaming, deep work that's being done supports those conversations, being able to move forward to relentlessly pursue this, that it's okay to innovate. This is also addressing that question about the difference between Heidi and Camille of innovation versus just dissemination. That it isn't enough to just share best practices, but to try what authentically makes a difference. And if we find that it hasn't, what are we willing to do now? And that really means continuously finding ways to empower staff. I think you've heard a variety of ways in which that's been done in order to continue to do that. And that being able to say, listen, we tried this, it was colossally not successful, and it's okay, that's okay, and what are we going to do now? So,
I'll add to that and just share that my additional thoughts relate to those collaborative conversations and building in a component of being data driven. I've been in this district not as long as Pierangeli, but a fair amount of time. I think 17 years. And prior to that elsewhere. And I have to say that having data driven conversations is not typical here in Palo Alto Unified. And I think we need to get more comfortable with looking at data, not using it as a judgment tool, and making sure that teachers are comfortable with that as a task and a challenge, because that is their experience so far. And part of that is going to lead to that relentless pursuit of whatever's next, and the continuous part of the innovation in the D-School thinking and all those things that we're all trying to incorporate into our work is that iterative cycle of failing forward. And so the idea of not using data to have to have a grounded conversation in it is kind of sad. I think we need to get people to become more comfortable with that, and to make sure that they know how to look at that data and how to make inferences and question and try and figure out what is that one strategy that we can try and change and see if it works again, as opposed to throw everything out and start over. I think 2 years ago I started out my presentation with saying, you know, our school communities are a microcosm of our larger community, and we have a lot of people in our community who are amazing. And some of us like to start stuff and some of us like to finish stuff. More of us like to start things. Most of us don't keep going. That persistence piece is kind of lacking, and that's kind of built. That concept of starting things has given Silicon Valley its name. So, and my family moved here because of that, right? So I lived that, actually. So the notion of sticking with something and really continuing to keep going, and, or as I referenced earlier today, jumping to that next curve rather than letting it die off and starting something else brand new, like just continuing with it is a hard one for some of our teachers with some more longevity. I think those data-driven conversations and those data dialogues are really important and need to become more a part of what we do on a regular basis.
And I would just add, Greg specifically mentioned his collaboration and passing on of the Mind Trust to Pally, and that's definitely something that Denise and I at Gunn, Terman mostly feeds into Gunn, have begun conversations with her being new this year. As I referenced earlier to the 2-block walk, it really is that short of a distance, and yet it can be a significant distance if you don't bring intention to those relationships. Definitely in the past we have had some 8th to 9th articulation meetings similar to what was done with 5th to 6th. I think it would be great to revisit that and what that might look like. In addition, I think this idea of focusing on data and being able to share that data, certainly from a counseling standpoint or case management standpoint, there are transition meetings that take place around conversations around specific students going on to high school. Sharon's site has the particular challenge of feeding into both of our high schools. Definitely, I think it's a place to strengthen our look at what those transitions mean, working with the high school principals. And again, what I want to say is that I think this is a really strong 5 secondary leadership team, and we're all invested in being able to do that. So.
Sure. How about 5 more minutes? We have a public comment, and I know Dr. McGee wants to make a few comments as well.
We're going till 2:15.
Yeah, till, or 12:15, Freudian slip.
You're going
We
till
can do that,
till 2:15.
Yeah.
Yeah, AM.
Just so we know what that.
Yes, please.
I just want to add, someone, thank you, just handed me some water, and as I glanced back to say thank you, I also saw Barbara Klausner. So I want to acknowledge that, although it hasn't been mentioned here beyond PTA, I really want to mention the strength and the resources of our community collaborations in this district. And specifically, I was just thinking, because we've been talking about this, of one of those connections between the 8th to 9th grade is often through the vehicle of our community collaboration. So for instance, Dreamcatchers, which operates both at our middle school level and on our high school campuses. I think that being able to better leverage the way in which our students transition, that isn't only from campus to campus, but how is it, whether it's through their athletic experience, their music experience, their after-school support experiences. There are many ways in which we could look at that 8th to 9th grade transition. So,
That's a pretty good segue, actually. Why don't we we have one public comment, and if anyone else would like to speak, just raise your hand. We can do the card later. But welcome back, Ms. Klausner. Would you like to find a mic, maybe here right next to Ms. Baker?
Should bring a chair.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna have a little makeshift timer.
Oh,
There you go. There you go.
All right, that's better.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Obviously, you guys are incredible. Thank you so much. And in case you're not aware, Dreamcatchers has gotten tremendous support from all three principals. Their enthusiasm, I was not totally surprised, but thrilled that you mentioned the same challenge across the board. And Dreamcatchers is part of that, trying to address the challenge just as you are. So not surprised that they are so enthusiastically supportive. Love the questions that you're asking. They're all at a really great level of structural, organizational, and really informative. And the answers I'm finding fascinating. I'm going to, just out of curiosity, dig down on one thing, because obviously there's so much going on at each of your schools. And I was fascinated by the comment that Sharon made about looking at grades and Ds and Fs, and the challenge of trying to figure out how you measure what really matters. And having taken over at Dreamcatchers, that's something that fills my day and night. How do you figure out? And so I'm curious, rather than looking forward, just to have you maybe take a few minutes, if you want, to share what kinds of conversations I'm sure all three of you have had at your staff level about how do you figure out if you can't just rely on grades. And I agree, you can't. You feel like you're making progress with students, but how do you measure that? So if you wanted to share some of the insights on that, that was my only question. Thank you.
Well, I feel like I have two responses. One, come back in a year and I'll let you know how the whole year is going. But I think for us at JLS, we've looked at this and we've explored this for a few months now, and we've really made a commitment to looking at moving towards standards-based grading. But in terms of standards-based grading, you have to do a lot of legwork. And one of the very first essential pieces is the creation of what's called a learning target. And those are sort of kid-friendly statements that are written with children in mind around what it is they're supposed to be able to do. So basically, you have a learning target that starts with the two words, I can. And those statements help the child know what it is they're supposed to be learning and know what they're supposed to be able to do. So the child should be able, if I walk into the classroom, I should be able to say, do you know what you're supposed to know and be able to do by the end of this period? Or by the end of this unit, or by the end of this assignment, or whatever the chunk of time is. Do you know what it is you're supposed to know and be able to do? And can they tell me? And that's related to that learning target. Then they should be able to answer the question, where are you in the process of learning this? Mm-hmm. So what is it you're supposed to know and be able to do? Where are you in your learning? And if you're not quite at that proficient or mastering level, what are your plans and what are you going to do in order to get there? And if you are there already, what are you going to do to extend your knowledge? So there's a series of questions that all children should be able to answer if they're taking ownership and responsibility of their learning, and they come to school to learn, not to earn a grade, not to collect points, not to check it off the list, not to do all those things that all of us experienced. That's not the world that our students right now are going into. So for us to stick with that pattern and that methodology of instruction is not actually helpful and beneficial to them. So making that shift is huge. Just that one piece of shifting into having all teachers write learning targets related to their assignments. The next step after that, of course, would be to scale those learning targets so kids can actually see very clearly what is proficient, so grade level expectation, what is exceeding grade level expectation, and what does it look like when you're approaching? What is your pathway along the way? What does that look like? How do I know I'm advancing? How do I know I'm getting there? What are some markers? And maybe a student gets, a 1 or a 2, and they're on their way. And then beyond that, once you scale those learning targets, of course, then it would be to report out how the student is performing to the parent. That is all dependent, of course, on feedback. So really clear and specific feedback from the teacher on the learning, not a -1 point here or 10 points there. It's you made a mistake in this step and you made that mistake in this step on 3 problems. You need to go back and figure that part out. You need to relearn that. You need to retake this. You need to redo whatever. So it's a real give and take between students and teachers. So that's where we are in our process of making a shift. It's wildly popular and a hot topic at JLS. We are getting a lot of support, not just from our teachers, but to who are interested in doing this, but they're receiving a lot of positive feedback from the parent community and the students. The students are pretty awesome, I have to say. I could tell some anecdotes, but we don't have time, so I'll be back next year.
And I would just share that in August, 11 staff members at Terman approached me to begin this same work at our school site. So they began with a PLC book study of some of Marsano's work on authentic assessment and have moved into identifying targeted learning skills for students. So we're very excited about it as well. Our student council student survey of those classrooms where they are beginning to look at this work and approaching students, very excited feedback, as well as from our site council with parents as well.
So I'll just add real quick, staying within the world of what we commonly know as our current grading system, I'm going to give a quick example of how we use data to inform instructional practice and address the issue of equity, So when we have our AST file, again, those are the kids who are failing one subject in the D or F. We're also cataloging who those students are and what areas they are failing in. So for example, we can identify if 8th grade science is trending, if you will. Are we getting a disproportionate number of all of our kids failing 8th grade science? And if we are, well, why? So then those are conversations we have with our teachers. Well, how are you structuring your curriculum? What is it that we're assessing? Are we assessing executive functioning skills? Or are we assessing content mastery? And those are very valuable conversations. The other piece is who these students are. So if we have data on all of our failing students, again, is there a disproportionate number of students who are categorized as minority students who are failing? And if so, what do we need to do to not make them fail? Are we artificially and unintentionally setting them up for failure through the way that we're structuring our curriculum, or what we're asking them to do at home and what we're asking them to bring back as completed work?
And the only thing that I will add, because I was really struck, Barbara, about the question being worded and how we know if students are being successful. So I would also say that there's that whole arena of whether or not our students are willing to take risks. It's also around access, let's say, to higher levels of math, higher levels of science when they matriculate onto high school. I would also say that when we are looking at data, if we are really delving into this work of looking at that cross-reference of who is in our discipline pool, is it the same students who are also having academic challenges or not? I think that these are some of the places or ways, who is perhaps needing mental health supports. If we're looking at a whole human being and measuring success well beyond just their academic levels, to really develop talent and character and allow students the springboard to their full development, we have to look at all of those other ways in which we intersect with students. And very often what we're finding as we delve into this, it is the same general group of students who are perhaps struggling academically, who are in our higher discipline pools, who are not in our higher levels of math and science, and who are perhaps not availing themselves of some of our mental health support. So I think it's across the board when we're looking at our students to be able to.
Thank you. So I think we're up against the clock. I know Dr. McGee has a couple of wrap-up things to add.
Thanks. Very quickly, there's been so many words written about leadership, and here you exemplify it. The courage, the dynamic leadership, visionary, your work ethic is incredible. But I think, Dana, going back to that Rotary Club yesterday, I remember one of the slogans, Rotary is service before self. And all three of you are truly service-oriented leaders. And we are so fortunate to have you here. I think my most fervent wish is that we could have a whole room full of fifth grade parents. All these second cups of coffee, they want to talk more about middle school. Sometimes in elementary school, they're so nervous about it. And so I hope that we can find a way to share just some of the highlights of today. today with our fifth grade parents are, I know you talk with elementary principals, but I just wanted to commend you for your service, your hard work, your collaboration. That's really impressed me here. I hope that you continue to share these innovative ideas and best practices, because I think that has a potential to make exponential improvements. And finally, you have whatever support I think you need for this asset-based work you're doing with students of need. And that's the other thing that I hope to that we bring out even more fully, is that the work you're doing with these students who need support, who are struggling, who are socially, emotionally, academically, you do it through an asset base. You're building their strengths, identifying their strengths and building on them, and not seeing these kids as coming with these deficits. And that, again, has really impressed me. I think in the long run it will not only benefit these students, but benefit our community and far beyond that. So thanks again. This is my first SIPS experience, and I can see why this is your favorite board meeting, Melissa.
Yeah.
So, good. Thanks again.
Good, thank you. And you were all very generous with your praise for your staff. We'd like to also extend our praise to you, and please share our appreciation to your staff as well. And thank you, Dr. Young and Ms. Baker and Dr. McGee. So with that, we will see you back at 5 o'clock.
Oh,
Not all of you,
boy.
but yeah.